very first Facebook Live. Never done this before, so I hope you guys know what you're doing. I'm in the hands of experts, but you should be able to leave your questions, your comments in the feed for this very post. So welcome to everybody who is tuning in. We're going to be talking about whatever you want to be talking about, but I also just want to say we have our very first sight of it. This is the bound manuscript for Times Convert, which we're giving out to librarians and people in the book trade this week. It's still not corrected and it's not perfect yet, so not quite ready for you guys, but it's definitely out there. This is the first time I get to see it, so it's always kind of a special moment. All right, so we're going to put that there, and now I'm going to turn around and start answering your questions. So the first one is from Alexander. How do you feel as an author about having the opportunity to see your work in live action? Great question, Alexander. The thing about it is that it's an incredible sense of privilege because so many people are coming together in the television show, and I'm assuming that's what you're talking about there with the live action. Hundreds of people from all over the world came together in Wales to translate the All Souls trilogy into a new medium, into the medium of television. And so it's really humbling and it's a real privilege. It's exciting. There's always surprises. And of course, there's always some, nerve-wracking moments when you think, oh, this is a little different and how do I feel about this? But in the end of the day, you just have to sort of trust the crew and the performers. And I've seen the finished results now and they're just spectacular. So it's a good thing. Okay, we have a question from Catherine. Is there a particular scene or part of the show that you're looking forward to the fans seeing? That's a good question, Catherine. It's hard to pick one. Having seen the first episode, I can't wait till you guys see the opening. It's so thrilling and it's so emotionally gripping for anybody who's read the books. So any readers of the All Souls trilogy, I think, are going to be just immediately transported by the opening. But I have to say, I absolutely love the moments that are in the Bodleian and also the moments that are in the Bishop House. And those were all done on sets in the studio that were completely built by our amazing design team led by James North. And so I'm really waiting for you guys to gasp as I did when you see the Bodleian and the Bishop House for the first time. All right, Nicole wonders, is there a character you've written who turned out to be completely different than what you had planned out or expected? Okay, well, of course, I never had a plan for Gallowglass and Hamish, so that was, for anybody who's read The World of All Souls, our new companion guide that just came out, you know that Hamish and Gallowglass were both unexpected characters, but this question is a little bit different. So in terms of turning out a little bit different, I'm not quite sure that I ever thought that we would see Jack Blackfriars again, but he just wouldn't leave my heart or my mind, and he just wanted to tell his story. So he just kept kind of pushing his way in ways that weren't in the initial plan, but I couldn't be more delighted by that. So, okay, question from Amanda. Can vampires mate more than once? Because we know Varen and Ernst are mates, but he's human with a short lifespan compared to a vampire. Great question. Mating. So a lot of times Convert has to do with Marcus and Phoebe and their mating and Phoebe's transformation into a vampire. And here's the thing about mates. You do only get one mate in your life. And Varen and Ernst are married, but they're not mated. So it's not that you can never love anybody again, but there's something very different and distinct about a vampire's mate. Vampires live a long time. It would be a pretty lonely life if you could only have one mate and they were human, but you do only get one of them, sadly. And then you have to learn how to love in a little bit of a different way, which I think for anybody who's lost a life partner, you know that it may not be easy, but it is possible for you to love again. So that's one of the great lessons and the great stories we get to tell with these characters. Okay, Dawn Holloway wants to know, did you get any input with choosing the actors? Okay, so readers of the trilogy know I'm pretty opinionated. So yes, I got to give my opinions when it came to choosing the actors. And I can tell you with absolute 100% sincerity, I completely completely embraced, welcomed, and was excited about absolutely every single person we cast in the show, without exception. And I think that when you guys see them and get to know them, you're going to feel as excited by that as I did. Okay, Eden Graham wants to know, who is your favorite character from the All Souls trilogy and why? So picking favorite characters from the trilogy is a little bit like trying to name your favorite child. I'm not sure it's really a good thing to have favorites. Here's the big secret with writing fiction. All of the characters are actually somehow, in some way, me. So I know a lot of you think, oh, well, she's Diana. Actually, temperamentally, I am not like Diana at all. The character I'm most temperamentally like is actually Emily Mather. So from that point of view, I guess Emily is my favorite, but there's something I admire or I aspire to be in almost every character. And even when it comes to the villains, people like Benjamin, there's something in Benjamin that I can understand, even though hopefully, happily, I'm not actually, walking and talking around and being 100% embodiment of Benjamin. It's still kind of scary in a way to kind of think, wow, but he still somehow lives inside me. So, okay, so we've got a question from Lydia Hurt. Hello, Lydia, who wants to know, how is writing Times Convert different than the All Souls trilogy? So every book in the All Souls trilogy, A Discovery of Witches, Shadow of Night, The Book of Life, and now Times Convert, every single one of those books was a different writing experience. And after every one of the books, I thought, wow, I've sorted this out. Now I know exactly what it's going to be like to write the next book. I can see all the problems that are coming, and I'll be able to avoid them. This is not actually how it works. So I think, again, it's a little bit like having children, where you just have to love every single one of the books for what it is. They're not all the same. I know that there are those of you who've got favorites among the books that I've written, and I think that's completely fair. It doesn't, people say to me, does that bother you that I like this one more? No, absolutely not, because each one of them is different. It's a series of books, but they're still unique creations. And so the way that Times Convert was different, I think, was that it is not part of the series. It's not just a sequel or a continuation. And that meant that it needed to have a little bit of a different voice. It needed to sort of stand on its own and its own 2 feet. Sure, we get to follow the story of Diana and Matthew and the children in Times Convert. We get to see Phoebe become a vampire. We get to learn about Marcus's past, but it's not just a smooth kind of rollover from the Book of Life into this book. So those were challenging. It was challenging as well to write about the 18th century, which isn't my area of expertise like the 16th century was in Shadow of Night. And so I was on a really steep learning curve, and I got to experience what it was to be a student again. So it took a little bit more time than maybe I had thought back in the glory days of thinking, oh, I've sorted this all out and I know how to write a book now. But I love this book, and I hope that you guys will too. Amalia Palagana Spagnolo, and I probably butchered that, and I'm sorry, asks, do you feel that you're at the point of having told the entire All Souls trilogy story? I probably shouldn't say this because then you're all going to want release dates, but I am not done telling stories from the All Souls world. I have a lot more stories to tell. And so now I just have to figure out how can I tell them so that you still want to hear them. And that's my job as a writer. And it will take me a little while to figure out every single one of those stories, how to tell them, how to bring them to you. I've got a great team at Viking Penguin helping me with that project. And I've got all of you who are so welcoming and warm and receptive whenever I say, hey, I've got this crazy idea for a story. So as long as you guys are reading, I'll keep writing and telling the stories that you are asking for. And we'll just kind of take it one story at a time, see where we get to. So, Stacy Canova, asks, what have been your favorite locations to visit? Oh, to research for the books, and any you're looking forward to visiting for future stories. Okay, again, I probably shouldn't say all this, but I have to go to places if I'm writing about them. So some of the favorites so far that I had never been to, had only read about before I started writing the All Souls trilogy, were Prague, one of the most magical cities on the planet. And then, of course, I got to revisit places I really loved, like London, which I had already known quite well. And all I'm going to say to you is I'm spending some time this summer on a boat off of the coast of Ireland. So you guys can imagine what I'm thinking about maybe in a few weeks when I go away and spend some time sailing the seas between Scotland and Ireland. So to be continued. So Jessica Crawford, is Gallowglass going to get his own book? I'll let you know after I sail around in the seas between Ireland and Scotland in a few weeks. Gallowglass I can sort of see in the batter's box a little bit. He's sort of standing behind Matthew and a few other little characters, but we're getting to Gallowglass. I promise we'll get there. Okay, so I've got a question from Jane Gold, who says, hi, Deborah, what inspired you to write the trilogy? Were you influenced by a favorite author? You know, I'm a kind of professional reader of nonfiction, so what really spurred me on to write the trilogy was a question. And that's me as a historian. Historians ask questions, and then we try to figure out what the answers are. So when I started writing the trilogy, it literally was about a question, and that question was, if there really are vampires and witches and demons and all these supernatural creatures, where do they live? What do they do for a living? And why don't I know any of them? And that was where the world started. I started imagining, where would these creatures be? And why don't I know anybody who is one of them? Because I think that would be a really interesting thing, to have a friend who was a witch or a demon or a vampire, or in some other way different from the average person. So it started with a question. I do think that there's a lot of DNA of books in the stories. I'm a very great fan of A.S. Byatt's book Possession, which is about a sort of an academic mystery. I loved The Witching Hour by Anne Rice. It was the first book I ever stayed up all night to read from cover to cover. And I love the time travel books of Connie Willis, especially a book called The Doomsday Book. So I think that you readers of those texts can probably find little traces of the DNA in my stories, but it wasn't any one author who really influenced it. Delaney Adkins wants to know, did anything you've written in the books frighten you? Yes. Both when I was writing it and also retrospectively, because you have to kind of go to a dark place if you're going to write about dark things. I didn't like it when Matthew left Diana on her own at Set Tour in the first book, and I didn't like what happened between Kit and Louisa and Diana in Shadow of Night. But what was really tough for me, always tough for me, is exploring the parts of the stories that have to do with the Holocaust and the concentration camps and Benjamin. And so whenever I have to encounter evil on that kind of level, on that scale, it's very frightening to me. And it's very frightening for me to live inside that world and that logic. And so my friends and family have learned that to recognize the signs when I'm writing about the darker days of Philippe or about Benjamin, and to kind of give me a little bit of space, because I will come out on the other side and be back in the light again. But it can be frightening to live there. And now we've got time for one more question. Dana Mon says, have you been on set to watch your characters come to life? What a great question to end with. I was lucky enough to be on the set throughout the filming. I was there at the very beginning, and I was able to check back in all the way through to the end of the shoot, which was a 6-month period. So again, hundreds of people working their guts out for 6 months to make this television show. And those moments were just breathtaking. I feel like I'm welling up here. To see Teresa Palmer or Matthew Good or any of our other fabulous cast members bring these characters to life, it's unreal, because it's like my imaginary friends are standing in front of me and talking. So yeah, it was a pretty emotional experience, which I guess also circles back to one of our very first questions. So I want to thank you guys for coming to my first Facebook Live. Who knows, maybe they'll convince me to do this again. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking, but thanks for being so welcoming, and thanks to the great Facebook Live team here at Book Expo, who walked me through it and held my hand when I got nervous. So thanks, guys. See you on the internet. See you soon. See you with Times Convert.